Bonsoir, bienvenue à la réception d'excellence de la Faculté des sciences sociales. Good evening and welcome. Moi, je m'appelle Vicky Barham, je suis la doyenne de la Faculté des sciences sociales et je suis super contente de vous accueillir. Je veux aussi souligner ma collègue Véronique Strimel, qui est la vice-doyenne aux études de premier cycle. Et donc, tout ceci est organisé par Nathalie Saumur, qui est le responsable de l'expérience étudiante. Et nous avons nos 5 panélistes. So I'll introduce very, very briefly our 5 panelists soon, but it is so exciting that we have 3 in person and then 2 online. So if you are here this evening, it's because you are an amazing student. One of the very, very top students in the faculty. And so we organize this event to recognize your accomplishments and to give you a glimpse of what might be next. Okay, si vous décidez poursuivre des études aux études sup ou de poursuivre vos études en droit, donc ça se ressemblerait à quoi? We've invited our 5 panelists to share the story of their transition to graduate studies or law. We've got Oxford, Harvard, McGill Law. At the north, it's Kira. She's at Northwestern in Chicago, and Claire is at Concordia in Montreal. Okay, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves shortly. So, et puis après qu'ils se sont présentés, on va avoir une séance de questions-réponses. So for the question and answer session, there'll be questions from you here in the room. There are a whole lot of people who are online. There'll be questions from them as well. Et donc pour ceux parmi nous qui sont à distance, donc on vous invite à mettre vos questions dans la boîte de Q&A. So maintenant, on va procéder à introduire les panélistes. On va juste aller de gauche à droite et du nord vers le sud. Donc, ils vont chacun prendre 3-4 minutes. Donc, Ryan.
Perfect. So I get to test the technology first. Hi, everyone. First of all, welcome and congratulations for being here. I remember my time in Ottawa, which was not that long ago, and I know how hard it gets to actually maintain good grades, and like sometimes it's so stressful when we're in the middle of it to kind of always think about what we need to achieve and how we need to achieve it. So congratulations for being here in the first place. I think it's amazing. I've been told it's very bilingual, so I'm going to be changing from French to English as it goes. If it gets very hard to follow, please just let me know and I'll adjust accordingly. Donc, pour parler un peu de mon parcours, donc moi, j'ai fait mes études, donc j'ai grandi à Montréal, donc j'ai passé par le système du cégep pour ceux qui sont familiers avec le système. Donc, tout de suite après, j'ai pu appliquer pour l'école de droit. J'ai obtenu une bourse qui m'a permis donc de venir faire mes études à l'Université d'Ottawa, la bourse Leurs. J'ai fait mes études dans le double programme en droit et en développement international. Donc, le développement international étant ce que j'ai fait à FSS. Tout de suite après mon droit à Ottawa, j'ai redéménagé à Montréal, donc la ville dans laquelle j'ai grandi, pour compléter mon JD, donc my common law. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with like the law school system, but like there is like these 2 systems. So I wanted to get both just because I didn't know where I'll end up at the end of that journey. Et rightfully so, I did not know where I was going to end up, because afterwards I applied for the Rhodes Scholarship, and I was very, very privileged to be awarded the scholarship that led me to continue my studies at the University of Oxford, where I'm currently a student. So I'm a bit jet lagged at the same time because I just got back to kind of meet you all. Currently, I'm doing a Master's of Public Policy, and I intend to continue my studies at Oxford in law again afterwards. So maybe either a master's in law or DPhil in law. This is still work in progress. Keep me guys in your prayers, because I applied to different things and hoping that something will work. So that's a bit like the general idea of what I do right now, or where I'm at. I'll be very happy to discuss the details as to the why I chose this path. What would I do differently now, and things like that. But I'll leave it to your questions, so we make sure to hear about my other panelists here. Thank you.
My name is Prabhup. Je vais parler en anglais. Il y a quelqu'un que je pratique français. Alors, so my name is Prabhup, and I come from Vancouver, BC. And I was here at the Faculty of Social Sciences doing my International Development and Globalization degree between 2015 and 2020. So I graduated the first COVID year, of course, where we weren't sure what was happening. So that was my background. And while being in Ottawa, I was at the Senate Page program. So I did 2 years at the Senate, followed by working there in different capacities for the duration of my undergrad as well. So kind of that was my way of getting an understanding of the federal political system while also understanding the international development side that FSS is very rigorous about. So that kind of dual path running parallel to each other. So following that, as I said, I graduated in 2020, and that was COVID time. And there was a little bit of uncertainty. I was working at the Canadian Embassy in Laos at that time, getting some practical experience. That was also cut short, turned virtual. And I had this plan of going to law school. And I was so set, this is what I have to do. Law school it is. And I don't think I was internally convinced, but I had convinced myself that this is something that I need to do. And at that point, I felt like I wasn't quite ready to jump into it right away. So I took a year off. But, you know, I think many of you might kind of relate to this, that there was uncertainty about, oh, well, what if I don't apply to anything? So I kind of just applied to NIPSIA at Carleton, the International Affairs program. And because COVID happened and I had gotten funding from them, I did end up doing that program in diplomacy and foreign policy. And after that point, I applied to law school. I got into McGill Law, which was kind of what I wanted to do at that time. But I think by that point, I had decided that law school isn't what I want at this time. So if there's if there's anyone who is contemplating, is law school it, is law school not, or just wants someone to validate their decision, either way, we can talk about that. And then following that, this was kind of part of the plan. I did my master's at Harvard, and I focused on ethics, politics, religion, and that aspect, but it was more so kind of an ethics training and ethics and politics focus. So yeah, that was that. And I graduated last year, and I'm currently applying to different jobs, but I am working in a research position with a professor at Harvard currently. So there's a little bit of different things going on there, and I'm happy to talk about either any one of them as we go down the questions. So thank you.
Tim.
This thing on, yeah. Thank you very much. So my name's Tim. I am from Sherbrooke, Quebec, and I'm currently in my first year at the McGill University Faculty of Law, and I graduated in political science here at the Faculty of Social Sciences. So yeah, I relate to a lot of what's already been said about the uncertainty about applying to law school, and that's something that I was experiencing when I was trying to consider whether or not law was the right path for me. And so I think it's really important to have a really clear idea about why you want to do law school and what your motivations are. And I think throughout my degree in political science, I've been thinking for a while about what I wanted to do next and if law was the right path for me. And then there are two experiences that stood out that I wanted to share. The first is throughout my time at the University of Ottawa, I was very lucky to get involved with the student government at the University of Ottawa Students' Union, where I was running for 3 years at the USU. And I found that a lot of the opportunities to advocate for people, to advocate for others, especially during COVID-19, because I spent 2 of those years, as we all did, at the University of Ottawa during some pretty more stringent pandemic measures. And so advocating for pass-fail grading, mental health, things like that, was super, super important and very fulfilling. And then also some academic experiences that I had through the Faculty of Social Sciences. J'ai eu l'occasion de voyager en Allemagne lors d'un cours de recherche là-bas avec le professeur Daniel Starkhammer, avec des étudiants d'ici et aussi de la Corée du Sud. Donc, on est allé ensemble là-bas étudier la réunification de l'Allemagne et voir ce qui marchait bien, ce qui ne marchait pas. Et donc, ça m'a vraiment donné le goût d'aller apprendre sur le terrain et de préconiser une profession, une carrière où tu peux travailler directement avec les gens. I think law is not just about rules, but also about relationships, right? And about solving conflicts in society. And so those two experiences that I got, thanks to the faculty, I think really helped me make that decision. So So yeah, I'm trying to think about what else I should say. But no, I mean, I was a student here last year, so I think we'll all be talking about our paths here today and what worked for us. But I think it's worth mentioning that there's different things that could work for you, and there's not one path to whatever destination you're going for. And so I think all of our interventions should be taken kind of with that grain of salt, and also knowing that ultimately, I think you know deep down what's best for yourselves. So I'll leave it there and happy to take some questions.
Now, Kira, the only one of the panelists who's one of my former students. Kira, would you like to
yes.
tell a little bit about your story?
Yes, so probably from knowing that I'm Vicky's former student, you can tell that I'm a PhD student in economics. I'm currently at Northwestern University. And like many of the other panelists, my path to graduate school was really shaped by the time that I spent at U Ottawa. I graduated in 2021, so I did get to see the Green Wall at FSS at its full glory pre-pandemic. But while I was at U Ottawa, one of the things that really shaped my undergraduate experience was working on some of the directed research courses that the faculty offers. And one of those was actually with Vicky. And it gave me this really great insight into what doing research at an academic level looks like. And thanks to that, I came to understand that this is what I wanted to pursue in graduate school. Like many of the other panelists have said, it's a big commitment to decide that you want to go to graduate school. For me, it's a 6-year commitment because that's how long PhDs in economics have gotten. And having that exposure to doing research at the undergraduate level was really just so helpful. And the other thing that I did at U Ottawa that shaped my path and is very unique to economics students is the Governor's Challenge. And this is run by the university's economics department. It's a competition where undergraduate students across Canada make a monetary policy recommendation to the Bank of Canada. I think it's a really unique experiential learning experience because you get to see the knowledge that you've learned in your courses applied to real life policymaking. And in large part, because of the Governor's Challenge, I spent 2 years at the Bank of Canada as a research assistant after I graduated. And this was, again, a great opportunity to get your hands dirty with trying to think about research questions and trying to understand if it's the right path to go to grad school, whether it's a master's or a PhD. So I would be very happy to talk about economic specific things and also, of course, how to decide, whether grad school is the right decision.
Thanks so much. Last but not least, we have Claire, who is doing anthropology.
Hi everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je m'appelle Claire. So, je suis en train de compléter la première année de mon master's en anthropologie à l'Université de Concordia. So, my name is Claire. I'm like Tim in my first year of graduate studies, so I feel very humbled to be invited here, and I'm really interested in all of the different paths of the different panelists. So I guess a little bit about me at U Ottawa. I attended U Ottawa from 2019 to 2023, so that put 2.5 years right in the middle during the most stringent period of the COVID-19 era, I guess, which made it very a very interesting experience. And while I was here, even though much of my schooling was online, I was still given the opportunity to do UROP, so the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. I did a field research course in Brazil, which was amazing, through the anthropology department. I worked for the Academic Writing Help Center, which was a really incredible experience. So all of these experiences and opportunities that I had at U Ottawa sort of gave space for my interest in research and teaching that I'm so lucky to be doing at Concordia. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about my research because I feel like that's, as someone in the first year of their master's, what I'm more so working on right now. So I'm doing research on the traces of Orientalism and imperialism and how this sort of leaves a mark on contemporary discourses of the body, health, wellness, and beauty. And as part of my research, and because I'm in anthropology, I do field work over the summer. So I'll be going to France. I'll be in the Île-de-France region and the Eure-et-Loire region this summer. So I'm really excited about that. En plus, au moment, je travaille comme assistant de recherche sur 2 projets anthropologiques. Un, c'est sur les temporalités différentielles de vieillissement. Et l'autre, c'est sur les cultures de fitness et la phénoménologie, c'est difficile en français, la phénoménologie de la transpiration dans les régions, les États et les régimes post-socialistes. So, because anthropology is quite specific and because these projects are all quite niche, I'm very lucky to be in a position where they all sort of tied together to this like broader curiosity that I have, which is about body image, health, medicine, and ultimately like the cultivation of the self. So to bring this back to sort of, the panel today, sort of what brings me to my research and pursuing grad studies is this curiosity to these questions, and then the questions that emerge from these questions and all the different sorts of approaches that you can take to them. And I feel that for me, at least in my approach to learning, what motivates me and the school that I'm at and the people that I surround myself with at Concordia, I'm able to pursue this question in a way that's very fulfilling and motivating. So one fulfilling aspect I'm finding of grad school for me at this stage is just all the freedom that I have to experiment and develop new approaches and methodologies. And there's also just so much collaboration, like space for collaboration and for discussion about what research can be or what research can do. And I'm really excited to talk about that during the panel. So, je suis donc très enthousiaste à l'idée d'en discuter avec tous. Et avec les autres panélistes, après de ce que j'ai entendu, c'est les histoires et la recherche hyper intéressantes. So, thank you so much.
Perfect. Merci beaucoup, Claire. OK, donc on va passer maintenant. Je pense que vous êtes des panélistes assez extraordinaires, donc on est vraiment très, très chanceux ce soir. On va passer maintenant à la séance de questions. Il faut absolument que vous passiez au micro, donc je vous laisse vous organiser de cette façon-là. Mais en attendant que vous vous présentez au micro, je vais commencer avec des questions qui étaient soumises en ligne. And I'm going to, with the questions that I'm going through online, I'm going to just ask one in turn, each of the panelists to respond to a question. And if you've got something else that you think really is important to add, feel free to chime in, but otherwise we'll try and do a maximum number of questions. So we'll start with you. What made you want to pursue graduate studies and why did you choose to go to graduate school?
C'est une excellente question parce que c'est vrai qu'à ce stade, et je pense Claire, tu l'as très bien exprimé, c'est quand même un engagement, donc il faut qu'il y ait une certaine forme de curiosité. Une chose que dans mon cas, je me rappelle, je débattais à l'époque, c'est cette question, à quel point je dois avoir une curiosité qui est spécifique. Et la question que je me posais, en fait, c'est que je me disais, si je vais aux études supérieures et que j'essaie de faire une recherche sur quelque chose de spécifique, j'ai peut-être pas une idée de qu'est-ce que je veux exactement rechercher. Et ça, c'était une grosse cause de stress pour moi parce que je savais que j'avais une soif d'apprendre. Je savais qu'il y avait plusieurs questions que je me posais, mais que rien, en fait, que je pouvais ramener à une question de recherche qui était facilement présentable dans une lettre de présentation. Donc, de manière générale, qu'est-ce qui m'a poussée à quand même faire le pas et aller chercher plus d'études? C'est le fait que je ressentais en fait que my learning to learn process was not over. I wanted to not only expose myself to more knowledge and to kind of like train my brain to think more deeply, more rigorously and stuff, but I also wanted to learn how to learn still. And I wanted to learn how to be methodologic, so to have a way of approaching questions, to have a way of approaching challenges, to kind of like keep myself accountable. If I have a question that comes to me, how do I find an answer that is as objective as a human being can possibly be? And so how do I engage in such processes? So for me, that decision was really tailored to this idea of learning how to learn. And I think that when you think about school like that, so you think about it beyond this idea of like, what am I substantially learning about economics or something like that, but more how am I navigating knowledge in a field of economics? How does an economist think? How does a lawyer think? Then that's actually a very, very safe way to make the best out of your school years.
For students who are undecided on their postgraduate path, what key questions should they be asking themselves today?
This is a very good question. I wish I had the answer to this a couple of years ago. But if it helps anyone, I think, it's important to think about, sometimes we attach ourselves to these dreams or goals at a certain point, and it's difficult to detach them, So I think this seems a little bit superficial, a little bit surface level, but I think that this is a very important question to ask, that if you've decided that something was a dream a while ago, is it still your dream today? And why? So introspection, I would say, is the theme that you kind of should go with. I think another thing to consider is, so why you want to do that. And I think it's very similar. So it's like, how does a lawyer think, as you said, or how does an economist think? Well, why is it that you need to go down that path to do what you need to do? Like, do you need to go? For me, I'll talk about law. I think I thought that, well, I don't want to practice law. I don't want to have my own firm or, work with any lawyers, but maybe it would help me in the policy field and I could work on the legal components in policy, maybe at global affairs, maybe in the foreign service. But I think it wasn't enough for me to be like, I need to invest 3 years of my time, of my energy, of my money for something that I'm not too even sure about. And I think it would just give me an edge. So I think you have to consider why you're doing that, and consider the practical components as well. I talked about introspection, but I think also, like I said, the money, the outcome, is that going to link you to exactly where you want to be right after? And I hope that answers the question. But I think those are some things, and I think talk to a lot of people. But, as you said, take them with a grain of salt, the advice that everyone has to give. But I think it will help you inform, it'll give you a better informed opinion and a better informed decision at some point.
Tim, qu'est-ce qui est le plus important, selon vous, pour être admis dans un programme de droit ou d'études supérieures? Et en fait, la personne qui a posé la question est spécifiquement intéressée par McGill. Ah. Mais il y a peut-être, je pense que les mêmes principes s'appliquent ailleurs. Si jamais ce n'est pas le cas, si d'autres parmi vous trouvent que sa réponse n'est pas tip-top pour vos institutions, il faudrait partager les secrets des autres.
Ben, merci pour la question. Et ça revient un peu, je pense, aux réponses aux questions précédentes. Le thème de l'introspection, je pense que c'est super, super important. Je pense que souvent, les études en droit, ça peut être très facile de juste ne pas savoir ce que tu veux faire, mais savoir que tu es capable au niveau académique de performer. Alors, tu continues dans le même chemin et tu arrives aux études en droit. Je pense que d'abord, you're not doing anyone any favors if you don't take the time to introspect. But also when you apply for these programs, and I've talked to people who are on admissions committees at other schools, not just McGill, I think probably the number one criteria that they look for, the overall theme, is your ability to articulate why law, why this particular profession, why this particular field of study. As for McGill's law faculty specifically, I think a huge draw for me was the dual nature of the program. So you'll learn the English-Canadian common law system as well as the Quebec civil law system at the same time. And there's different theories about whether or not that approach works or not. Different schools have different perspectives. But the idea at McGill is that you're basically learning not just one, but two legal languages at once. And so in so doing, you get to see some of the differences, or you get to critique the other system by learning the other one. So if that is something that interests you, if you're interested in potentially in practicing in Quebec, if you're interested in a more critical approach, that's kind of what drew me to McGill. But there's different law schools out there that each have their own little personalities, and so also very broad diversity of people who do go to McGill. So there's lots of different options there. But I think, again, just the number one thing is really being sure about your why law. It doesn't mean that you have to know, I want to be a labor lawyer, or I don't want to practice, I want to be a policy analyst. Like, if you have that kind of prescriptive path laid out and you're really sure in it, fantastic, like go off, good for you. But if you're, but on the other end, if you're just kind of doing it because you don't know what to do next, kind of end up there, I think it's a missed opportunity and something that I had to really reflect on and push myself to reflect on because it's not comfortable, but just having a more general idea and an ability to articulate why this program is best for you, I thought is, I think it's really important. And probably not just for law, but also for grad programs as well.
Are there other things that anybody would like to add that they think would be specifically important for the sort of program they're in? Or are we all good with what Tim shared? No? Well, Ryan?
All right, I think je rajouterais juste une petite information parce que je me rappelle à l'époque où est-ce que j'appliquais pour l'école de droit, c'est quand même très stressant et on a un peu cette impression où est-ce que c'est comme si on s'attendait de nous qu'on sache exactement ce qu'on veut et ce qu'on a à offrir et tout. Une chose qu'on m'a dit à l'époque et qui m'a été utile par la suite, c'est de garder en tête que quand vous êtes en train d'appliquer pour un programme, les personnes qui lisent vos dossiers sont très au courant de la position dans laquelle vous êtes dans votre vie. Donc, les attentes qu'ils ont envers vous sont des attentes qui vont être raisonnables dans le contexte dans lequel vous êtes. Donc, si vous êtes un étudiant qui vient de graduer du bac, ben, ils ne vont pas s'attendre de vous 10 ans d'expérience et un CV de ministre et quelque chose comme ça. Donc, déjà, essayez de regarder en fait au stade où est-ce que vous êtes, how can you fulfill your role to the best of the possible outcomes. And one thing that I've learned, I think, through the process that was very useful is instead of looking at experiences or aspects of your profile that seem more attractive just because they sound good, try to look more into the things that are meaningful to you. Because when you can reason why something has had an impact in your learning experience, then it's actually conveyed with so much more maturity and so much more depth that it usually has a bigger impact than something that may sound nice, but ultimately you don't have a rationale as to why it was useful or why did you learn from it. So try to always focus on something where you're like, in my process, what did I learn from the most and why, and convey that specific information, and it's going to take you way further than a title that sounded really good while you had it, but that really was not that meaningful.
Kira, now that you're in grad school, but also thinking back to the application process, what do you wish that you had known as an undergrad that might have, changed or whatever the whole process that you went through? Or that was what did you think? Something you thought that was not important that turned out to be important or whatever?
Let me say one economics thing and then I'll turn to more general faculty and social science things. There's something that you told me very early in my undergraduate career that I should have taken even more seriously than I did, which is to take more math.
So, I remember that.
Yes, so it was true, it's still true, and it will probably always be true for economics degrees, but take more math. More generally, I think one of the things that I wish I had done more in my undergrad was to branch out to other areas. So I didn't take a lot of electives. I took mostly economics and math courses, but the times that I did take, other courses in other faculties or on different topics within the Faculty of Social Sciences, I got a lot out of it. And I feel like it broadened my perspective on sort of what it means to learn in a university setting and what it means to have a broader perspective on the world. For instance, when I was a student, I ended up working at the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, which is very closely related to the University of Ottawa. It's possible to work with the Institute as a directed research course, and they do great work on a lot of policy topics. But I ended up working on First Nations issues, which I had no exposure to before. I had, quite an academic mindset in the sense that I was really focused on what I thought were, in my case, macro questions. But having done that and looking back on it now, it really helped me see the broader context for what we do as academics and as researchers. Like having a deeper grounding in the real world, as it may be, has been really helpful, and it's shifted my perspective throughout the years since then. So I would encourage you to take advantage of all of the opportunities you have to explore different things while you're a student.
Merci, thank you. Claire, comment est-ce que les cours aux études supérieures diffèrent des cours au premier cycle?
Ah, c'est une super bonne question. Merci à ceux qui l'ont demandé. Je trouve que pour moi, c'est la présence du prof. Parce que au cours de premier cycle, typiquement, la relation entre les profs et les étudiants, tu as autant des étudiants qui écoutent un prof qui parle pour 1 heure, 2 heures, 3 heures, n'importe quoi. Mais à l'université, au moins dans mon programme, c'est dans les sciences sociales puis les humanités. Souvent, comme le prof parle presque jamais, peut-être pour 10 minutes, 15 minutes pendant une période de 3 heures, parce que c'est nous qui sont responsables pour engager avec les textes hebdomadaires. C'est notre responsabilité de discuter et de donner comme les lectures généreuses. So, yeah, I think that would be probably the key difference. I don't know if it's necessarily, in terms of coursework specifically, a matter of, it's easier or more difficult. You're definitely expected to go more in depth, but at the same time, unless you're doing a course-based master's, you're probably not doing as many courses as you would be in your undergrad. I mean, I do 2 per semester versus in your undergrad, you're expected to do at least 4 or 5. So I would say you have more, it's not even more so independent learning, but rather more collaborative learning. Whereas in your undergrad, it would be much more of a sort of like, not necessarily one-sided discussion, but it would be far more, you're listening to the prof, you might have the opportunity to ask or answer questions, but at least in my experience, in the first year of my master's, the prof really, they're there to facilitate the discussion, to give like workshops or run exercises, and then to give you individual feedback on the coursework. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. I'm going to come back in the opposite direction rather than just go around in circles all the time. Kira, what was the hardest part of the grad school application process?
Oh, it's a good question. Let me think about this in sort of several parts. So the last part was very hard in its own right because you're just waiting for decisions. And for me, it was a multi-month process. They rolled in very slowly, and it was really a stressful time. There's nothing you can do anymore at that point. What's going to happen is going to happen. And so I would never want to go back to the process of applying to graduate school, but unfortunately, it's kind of a requirement. But when I was actually writing the applications, it was hard to look back at everything that I had done in the last 6 years, so 4 years as an undergrad and 2 years working at the Bank of Canada, and trying to summarize all of that down into why I would be a good candidate for these schools. It took a lot of thinking about who I was and what I had done and what made me want to pursue graduate school in the first place. But what made it easier was talking a lot to the people who were writing my letters. They guided me so much in figuring out what aspects of my profile to emphasize and what things I could change to convey the points of my academic path that maybe I wasn't thinking of as being so important, but that they really saw the value of. And so as hard as it is to apply to grad school, I think your best resource is really your mentors, the people who have gotten you to this point all along.
Thank you. Tim, il y avait quelque chose de très important en droit. Oui. How was the process of taking the LSAT?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't help you with this one. So I made the very poor decision of applying to only one law school, which you should never, ever do. So do not do what I did. But McGill doesn't require the LSAT, so I didn't have to take it. So, yeah.
Toi, tu as dû le prendre? Ah.
I did do the LSAT, and I do have to say that if you're serious about law, take the time to focus solely on the LSAT. I made the mistake. I mean, I wouldn't say mistake. It worked out, but I think it was a lot more stressful. Taking the LSAT alongside working full time, volunteering during summers, doing all those kinds of things, and then working on LSAT when I had time. But if you really want to take it seriously, maybe take a summer that is primarily, if not solely, dedicated to studying for that. Or you're taking out set times and you're strict with yourself to study for the LSAT, because LSAT is, you know, you'll wrap your head around the kinds of questions and the way that you have to think, but it's all about practice, and it's all about how quickly you answer the questions. It's a time game, you know. So I think like really practice, and focus on that, and don't be shy to take it another time. I think I took it twice. And it will improve your score if you've continued to practice. And that will also allow you to apply to multiple schools as well. So if that's one thing, I have a couple friends who are in the process of applying to LSAT, and that's what I say at all times. Just practice all you can.
Okay. While you've got the mic going though, could you comment, because I'm thinking perhaps for your program, this might have been an issue, whether or not volunteering and other sort of community engagement activities are important for getting into grad school, or having sort of specific research experiences. I think this is an interest particular for psych students, so we don't have a psychologist on our panel, but Kit, do you want to just talk about whether or not there are certain sorts of activities that do give you an edge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they totally do. I think it's important to focus on them. But I think, as Ryan said, make sure that it's something that's meaningful and that's something that resonates with you, and you are doing it for a purpose. It gives you some sort of, you know, fulfillment of different levels. You know, it doesn't have to be the most fulfilling experience that you've had in your life, but I think there has to be a purpose around it. So while at U Ottawa, I was involved quite actively with International Development Week here, with the Indian Students Federation, with the Development Students Association. I did debate for a bit. So there's a different, you know, a few different things that I did, and then leadership experience at the same time. So while I was at U Ottawa, for me, it was important to, I noticed that a lot of people didn't know a lot about my faith and my culture, which is, so I'm Punjabi and I come from a Sikh background, and I worked with the Faculty of Arts to actually introduce a course in Punjabi and Sikhism studies while I was here, just because there was a gap that I saw that needed to be fulfilled, and I wanted to do that. And the university was so receptive, and we put that up in a span of a couple months, and it was offered for 2 semesters already. So that was something that gave me fulfillment. That was something that I did just because I wanted to do it. And I think that that leadership, along with other activities, were important. But I will say over here that in grad school applications, what they're looking for is a thread. And I think I was I'm very grateful that I got this advice quite early on. So you have to show kind of it, not everything has to relate, but you have to show where the linkages are, why you did what you did. So they look at people, not always, but I think they like to see a breadth of experience, but then also depth in 1 or 2 areas. So it's kind of like a T that you should visualize. These are all the things that I did. These are the activities, the leadership experiences, but this is the one thing I'm really good at, or I'm really passionate about, and I'm willing to be good at, to work on that. So I think showing that amongst your activities and leadership experiences is a really good way to get yourself and your personality out in your personal statement.
OK, on va passer maintenant à Ryan. Et je pense que tu as parlé un peu de certains des mentors, mais la question, c'est comment se faire remarquer par les professeurs? Comment se démarquer des autres étudiants?
So there are good ways and bad ways. Which one should I start with? So I think that what I love about this question is that it's something that I personally struggled with in my own way. And what I mean by that is that I get awkward very easily. So I'm not the person to kind of like go and talk to each and every of my professor after class. If I actually don't have a specific question to ask them, I would cringe out of my mind. So like that's something I've never been able to do. I think that ultimately what allows you to kind of like get people to act as your references, because I understand that to be the underlying question here, is again to do what you have to do well. So basically, if you're a student, attend class, do your your readings in class. When a professor asks for a question, ask a question to the class, it's a good opportunity to intervene if you feel like you have things to add, or if you have questions to ask and things like that. To do that type of thing is already a good way to kind of create that type of link. At the end of the day, if I can give an example for me, the professors that acted as references for me throughout the last couple of years were all professors that I kind of ended up working with in research assistant positions or things like that, because their area of expertise was of a big interest to me. So we were already connected by our interest, and in looking more into like their profiles and what they were up to and stuff, I was able to kind of identify similar interests in many areas. And then I had something to talk about because I was actually curious about their work, and not because I knew that a couple of years down the road they would be acting as references. So what I would suggest here is professors not only usually kind of see you, they recognize you, they will like be used to having you around, and like they're more aware than we like to think they are. So they
That's
know what's
true.
happening, and that can backfire. That's why I'm saying there are bad ways and good ways.
That's true.
So they're very aware of what's happening in the classroom. So even then, that's a very good starter. So do your job and do it well. And then there's also behind each and every professor is just a normal human being with a whole life and interests and things they believe in and stuff. And when you kind of look into their research and stuff and you find things that are interesting to you, these are very, very good people and amazing experts and intellectuals to kind of go to and be like, I saw that you wrote an article on this and I think it's fascinating. I'm thinking about graduate school and I would love to discuss this with you. And most of the time I found that everyone was extremely open. And I suspect it's because they want to attract more people into academia. But that's just my understanding of it. I'm kidding.
C'est pas juste ça, c'est
Non, je
aussi
rigole.
que, en fait, les profs adorent savoir qu'ils ont eu un impact sur les étudiants,
Absolument.
que vous trouvez que c'est un peu intéressant. On est souvent très timide, on a peur que vous n'aimez pas. Et donc, lorsque vous venez pendant nos heures de bureau et vous voulez discuter avec nous, nous sommes ravis, nous sommes comblés.
Ouais, et donc, de ne pas hésiter de prendre ce pas et d'aller vers les professeurs pour leur poser des questions. Puis à la fin de la journée aussi, une fois par exemple que vous arrivez au stade où est-ce que vous demandez pour des références, un conseil que je peux vous donner à ce niveau-là, c'est take the person by the hand and kind of provide them with everything possible. So you can kind of guide a professor through a reference. Be like, hey, I was thinking about you because I think you saw this aspect of me in this context, and I would like you to share that aspect of my profile with the admission team. And then that one makes the professor's life so much easier because then they don't have to kind of like think about the whole thing to write a letter. But then you also make sure that it's exactly tailored to what you need as a reference to. So this is something we can also discuss a bit more during the cocktail hours. Yeah.
You look as though you'd like to just add a little something.
I think like yes to all of that. And I was also like honestly not a very active participant in class, back row kind of person. Going to office hours kind of terrified me. So if you're one of those people, I think like an opportunity that I learned about right towards the end, so I got there in time, were those courses where you get to know a professor a bit better in a setting where there's a few students or a research program. So whether it's Europe, whether it's the directed research courses, I did one of those. Whether it's field research, I also did one of those. I think that's a really great opportunity to get to know the professor and for the professor to also get to know your interests. And so when you go and ask for a reference later, it doesn't feel so awkward. It's like, remember me, I was in your first year poli-sci seminar. Like you can actually, you build a relationship with that professor and it feels more natural. So I think if you're able to take advantage of those opportunities, definitely, why not? And I think that's what helped me in my process.
I'm just going to add something. You don't want to just go to the person who gave you the highest grade. If they don't know anything about you except what your grade was, then they are going to write the following reference letter. John Cuthbertson was a student in my Micro 3 class in spring 2024. He earned a grade of 89. The class average was, he was ranked first, fifth, whatever it was. And there's nothing. That is the most totally useless reference letter imaginable. So if you want a good reference letter, you do need to try and build a relationship with the people who are going to be writing those letters. And as a general rule, trying to build relationships with full-time faculty as opposed to a doctoral student or a part-time professor is also, that's something that can be quite important because they actually know what the committees want to see. So they'll write they tend to write more effective letters. Prabhu, I've got a question. C'était quoi la question que je voulais te poser? Oh, no, it wasn't that one. It wasn't that one. Oh, I know what it was. So there's been talk about research positions.
Yes.
And the question is it quality? Is it quantity? And how on earth do you get opportunities to do research?
For sure. So I think it relates actually very well to the previous question about building those relationships and getting to know your professors. So for me, I did a teaching assistant position while at Carleton and then a research assistant position right now. But prior to that, I did not do that at U Ottawa. I did not see myself going down that path. So it was something that I never really ended up pursuing until it kind of happened by circumstance. And, I was like, okay, well, this is a good time to kind of experience it. So I don't think you always, for me, I think there was a little bit of fear when it came to like quantitative research. And I was like, I don't know if I can commit to a position that involves that. And I think that was a reason that I shied away from it as well in my undergrad years. So there are some positions at U Ottawa that you can take at an undergrad level as well. So I think when you get to know a professor, you get to know their work, especially because you've taken their class, you'll kind of have an understanding of what they are looking for and the kind of research and the kind of work that they do. So for me, in my current position, that was a research assistant position at Harvard. So this professor, he focuses on business ethics and the economic side of things and focusing on, CSR and ESG, like corporate social responsibility, environment, social governance, all those kinds of things. And I knew that his work would not kind of require that, like the quantitative side, but more research and briefs and that kind of thing. And there's some projects that he works on with Harvard Business School. So I just kind of reached out and I said, hey, like, are you looking for someone to help you out? I had an American visa, so that was also a logistical component, and I wanted a position to be able to retain the American work visa as well. So I reached out and he knew me. I don't think I got maybe the highest grade in that class, but I had developed that relationship. I had talked to him. I was also, I think, transparent about where my weaknesses were. I think that's another thing. You can talk to people about areas that you're not so sure about or you want to improve in, and they get to know you as a whole person and as a person who wants to get things done and improve. So I talked and I said, well, these are my expertise. These are the areas that I can contribute in. And he said, well, yeah, I would love to have someone on board to help out on these projects. I've actually been looking for someone and haven't been able to get to this project. Right. So I think sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask, even when positions are not advertised. And with people who know you, who can vouch for you and understand where you're coming from and the skill set that you can contribute as well.
Thanks. We have 2 questions in the room. So,
yeah,
merci.
I just wanted to ask before we wrap up. I noticed that many of you guys have received some pretty prestigious scholarships. I just wanted to ask, is there anything like concrete that you guys had on your resumes that you think really helped you win? I know that getting prestigious scholarships are very competitive, and I just want to know what set you guys apart from everybody else.
Diane, est-ce que toi, tu veux commencer?
That's an excellent question that I ask myself quite often too, honestly. I think that it really comes down to this idea that like, if there is, no one knows what it is. And the reason why I'm saying that, it's because when you look at the other scholars, then like we are so different. Like my neighbor in Oxford is also in the same scholarship as me, and I study public policy, and he's doing a PhD studying one specific bird. And I was so impressed because I was like, they selected us both. So like something went wrong at some point because I didn't understand like how we kind of like were alike, but then we were alike in our passionate pursuit of a specific goal. And so what I've learned through time, so I've been on 2 scholarships so far, currently one at Oxford, but I was on a scholarship at U Ottawa too. What I think is the common trait between all of those is this idea that like you need to have a very high sense of awareness of who you are and what you want and what's your actual goal. Where are you going with that? And most of the time, the way I look at scholarship is that it's a group of people who sit and invest in how reasonable your plan and your vision is. So if you're capable of like building that narrative to make it convincing, to be like, I know what I'm doing and I know what's the next step and I know why this is making sense and why this would have a good outcome, then that's like the kind of like the best shortcut to get it, right? And one little like technical thing too is there are a lot of scholarships, and it's so important to realize that the prestigious ones are just scholarships with enough resources to have amazing marketing teams. But that's honestly what it is in practice. And so there is so much money that is available for students to study in literally any university. I remember even Ottawa. I was talking to the dean of the law faculty, and she was dean when I was there too. And it's quite impressive how much money is never actually given because they're waiting for people to apply and people just don't know about them. And so any university you might be interested in, take the leap of faith. Because most of the time they're like programs where if you apply, for example, Oxford, if anyone is interested, Oxford, you apply and then they consider you for all the existing scholarships. So there's so many international students on scholarships, some less prestigious because the marketing team might have been a bit less on top of their thing or have less resources to do it. So there are so many opportunities that if you have something that you hold dearly, don't let money get in the way, because if I let money get in the way, I wouldn't have never made it that far. So pursue your dreams with like all your passion, and resources have this magical way of kind of like coming to you at the right time and right place. And I'm always happy to talk about scholarship applications. I've developed my own little expertise in the field, so please guys don't hesitate to reach out on that.
Are there any other commentaires à propos des bourses? Anyone else want to add anything? Tim?
Maybe just super quickly. I'm fortunate enough to have received the McCormick-Bain Scholarship to Feminist Studies in McGill. And I think it just comes back to what you were both saying about it's not one specific experience that if you get it, it ticks a box and then, they're like, oh, well, we'll pick this person. I mean, it depends on the criteria for the scholarships, but if it's more general in nature, I really, really doubt there's this like one thing that you have to do. I think it's more, again, about depth and your ability to articulate why you did what you did, what you learned from that experience, what challenges did you face, what went right, what went wrong, and just practice telling your narrative, your story, your true story to people around you, to mentors, professors, whatnot, so that you're able to communicate that to the people through your application and hopefully in interviews.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. So my question is for Claire, actually. I am also an anthropology major, and I was wondering how you got involved in some of the more hands-on kind of travel field work rather than kind of the academia related stuff.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited that somebody from anthropology asked a question.
Anthropology.
And it's a really good question because, yeah, I find with anthropology, often it's sort of like, it feels like we're always like in the back room, like we have the fewest amount of students in many departments, and it feels like, there aren't opportunities there. But sort of echoing what the other panelists have really thoughtfully mentioned, it's like there's always one professor with money that they're just sitting on, like who does want someone with your skill set. You just need to be able to articulate that to them and encourage them to see you as a viable addition to that research project. In terms of specific opportunities at U Ottawa, in terms of getting into the field research courses, which I would definitely fully recommend going on. I went on the one to Brazil with Meg Stalcup. It's 3 weeks and 6 credits, I think. So 2 courses worth of credits. And it really feels like it because you're doing work constantly like interviewing and doing participant observation and writing sort of like ethnographic exercises all day for like 3 weeks. And it is like really challenging, but in a like really intellectually stimulating way. So that I would really recommend. And in terms of less sort of, you know, big projects, because obviously like paying to go to like different places around the world is very expensive. There are also like a ton of opportunities through Europe, or just by asking a professor whose class you like, asking them if they have any research opportunities. Because even if they don't, many of them have students who run labs and collectives and research groups that do really interesting workshops and activities. Yeah, I think Sociology and Anthropology Week is going on right now, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd really recommend going there and connecting with undergrads and also the grad students there. I know a few of them and they're very nice, and they have a lot of cool projects going on. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, so we have to stop because the food is waiting. So, as we wrap up, donc je veux vraiment remercier, je pense qu'on veut tous remercier nos panélistes exceptionnels, Claire, Kira, Tim, Prabhu, et Ryan. C'est évident que le panel a suscité beaucoup de questions, donc notamment donc, de notre public à distance, mais je pense qu'il y en a pas mal de questions parmi vous encore. Donc, je vous remercie sincèrement pour les réponses. Je pense que ça va les aider dans leur cheminement. We're going to close, for those of you who are online, we're going to close the webinar shortly. For those of you who are in the room, refreshments await. And are with the exception of Prabhu, who has to rush off and get a plane back to Vancouver, the others are here to chat to you and answer more questions in person. Pour vous tous, que vous soyez ici en personne ou que pour ceux qui sont à distance, je veux juste souligner de nouveau à quel point nous sommes tellement fiers de vous. You deserve to be able to open all the doors that you want to knock at. Some of them won't open, but many will. And I just hope that you will be ambitious for yourself. Vous avez tant de potentiel. N'ayez pas peur. OK? Vous êtes prêts à prendre le prochain pas. And I hope very much that when you do get to those places that excite your imagination, that you will keep in touch with us and tell us about it so we have future panelists. Okay. Un grand merci à Nathalie. Nathalie a tout organisé, donc merci beaucoup. Aussi à l'équipe technique et donc à Véronique qui est ici. Donc, on va s'arrêter maintenant, mais merci à tous et à l'attaque.